I watched through my frosted window as Linda Whitmore, the HOA president, loaded the last of my firewood into her silver Lexus SUV, her perfectly styled blonde hair barely moving in the howling blizzard wind. The temperature had dropped to -15 degrees, the worst winter storm Montana had seen in decades, and this woman was stealing the only heat source I had left after the power lines went down 3 hours ago. My name is Marcus Chen, and I had moved to Pinewood Hills, a gated community just outside Billings, Montana, 6 months earlier. The place seemed perfect at first, beautiful mountain views, well-maintained streets, and friendly neighbors. What I didn't know was that Linda Whitmore ran the HOA like her personal fiefdom, enforcing arbitrary rules and making life miserable for anyone who dared question her authority. I had already received 3 violation notices for ridiculous things. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black, my grass was a 1/4 inch too tall, and I had parked my truck in my own driveway for more than 48 hours. But this was different. This wasn't some petty violation notice. This was theft, and it could literally cost me my life in this weather. I grabbed my phone and started recording through the window. The video quality wasn't great through the ice-covered glass, but I could clearly see Linda making multiple trips from my neatly stacked woodpile to her vehicle. I'd spent 2 full weekends in October cutting, splitting, and stacking that wood nearly 3 cords worth, enough to keep my fireplace going through the entire winter. The property deed clearly stated that the area where I stored the wood was within my lot boundaries, something I had verified with the county assessor after Linda had threatened to fine me for it back in November. My hands shook as I filmed, partially from anger and partially from the cold that was already seeping into my house. The power had gone out around 2 in the afternoon, and the temperature inside was dropping fast. My gas furnace needed electricity to run its blower and ignition system, which meant the fireplace was my only option for heat. I lived alone, but I had my elderly neighbor, Mr. Patterson, who had planned to come over if his house got too cold. He was 83 and had health issues. Without that firewood, we were both in serious danger. I watched Linda struggle with a particularly large piece of oak, cursing under her breath. She had parked her SUV right next to my property line on the community road and was carrying the wood about 20 feet. The blizzard had intensified, with wind gusts that had to be approaching 50 miles per hour. Visibility was terrible, with thick snow falling so heavily that I could barely see the streetlights that lined the road. After about 15 minutes, Linda's vehicle was packed full. She had taken at least half of my woodpile, maybe more. I watched her slam the rear hatch closed and brush snow off her expensive North Face jacket before climbing into the driver's seat. Her taillights disappeared into the white wall of snow within seconds. I immediately called 911. The dispatcher, a woman named Julie who sounded exhausted, answered after 6 rings. 911, what's your emergency? My name is Marcus Chen. I live at 847 Pinewood Hills Drive. My HOA president just stole approximately half of my firewood supply. With the power out in this blizzard, that wood is my only heat source. There was a pause. Sir, I understand you're upset, but we're dealing with multiple medical emergencies right now. The entire county is without power, and we have people stranded on highways. A property dispute isn't— This isn't a dispute, I interrupted, trying to keep my voice calm. I have video evidence of her taking my property without permission during a declared state of emergency. That's theft, and given the weather conditions, it's potentially life-threatening. I'm also concerned about my elderly neighbor who may need to shelter here. Another pause. I could hear radio chatter in the background. I'll file a report and send an officer when one becomes available. That might not be until the storm passes. Do you have any other heat source? No, that's why this is serious. Can you go to a shelter? The community center on Rimrock Road is open. I looked out at the blizzard. I can't see 10 feet in front of my house. I'm not driving in this. Understood. Stay inside, stay warm as best you can. We'll send someone as soon as possible. She took down my information and Linda's name before ending the call. I stood in my living room, watching my breath start to become visible in the air. The temperature on my thermostat read 62 degrees and dropping. I went to my garage and grabbed the emergency supplies I kept there: blankets, batteries, flashlights, and my camping gear. I set up my small propane camping heater in the living room, knowing it would provide some warmth, but nothing close to what the fireplace would have. Then I called Mr. Patterson. "Marcus?" His voice sounded weak on the phone. "Mr. Patterson, how are you doing? Is your house getting cold? It's down to 58 degrees in here. I've got every blanket I own piled on the couch." He coughed, a wet, rattling sound that worried me. "Listen, I need to tell you something. Linda Whitmore just stole most of my firewood. I'm trying to figure out what to do, but if you need to come over, I'll make it work somehow. I've got a camping heater running." "She did what?" The shock in his voice was clear. "That woman has completely lost her mind. Don't worry about me right now, Marcus. I've got my electric blanket plugged into a battery backup. I should be okay for a few hours. You focus on getting that wood back or finding another solution." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "But Marcus, document everything. Linda has been running this HOA like a tyrant for 5 years. Maybe this is finally the thing that brings her down." After hanging up with Mr. Patterson, I sat down and thought through my options. The storm wasn't supposed to let up until tomorrow afternoon. The power company had sent out an alert saying restoration could take 2 to 3 days. I had maybe another hour before my house became dangerously cold. I put on my insulated winter gear thermal layers, heavy coat, snow boots, and ski goggles. I grabbed a flashlight and headed out into the blizzard. The wind hit me like a physical force, nearly knocking me backward off my porch steps. Snow stung any exposed skin on my face. I made my way around to the side of the house where my woodpile had been. Even in the dim light from my flashlight, I could see the damage. Linda had taken the entire front section of the stack, the wood I had specifically positioned for easy access. What remained was pushed back against the fence, partially buried in snow. I started carrying wood to my front door, making multiple trips. Each journey through the blizzard left me gasping and covered in ice. After 30 minutes of work, I had moved about 2 days' worth of wood onto my covered front porch. My fingers were numb despite my gloves, and I was shaking from the cold and exertion. I went back inside and immediately started a fire in the fireplace. The kindling caught quickly, and within minutes, flames were crackling around the larger logs. The warmth was immediate and wonderful. I positioned myself close to the fire, letting my body temperature come back up. Once I could feel my fingers again, I checked my phone. I had several text messages from other neighbors. The first was from Sarah Martinez, who lived 3 houses down. "Do you still have power? Ours went out an hour ago," I responded. "No power here either, using fireplace for heat. Be careful out there." The next message was from Tom and Jennifer Walters, a young couple who lived across the street. "We just saw Linda Whitmore driving around in this insanity. What is she thinking?" That message had been sent 20 minutes ago. I replied, "She was at my house stealing my firewood. Did you see which direction she went?" Jennifer responded almost immediately, "What? Are you serious? We saw her heading toward her house. That's insane, Marcus. Do you need anything?" "I'm okay for now. Got a fire going. But I called the cops. This is beyond HOA nonsense." Tom sent a message. "Good. That woman needs to be stopped. She sent us a violation notice last week because our Christmas wreath was still up in January during a blizzard watch." I spent the next hour feeding the fire and warming up my house. The living room temperature climbed back up to 68 degrees, though the rest of the house remained cold. I closed off the other rooms and hung blankets over the doorways to conserve heat. Around 7 in the evening, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize with a Billings area code. "Mr. Chen, this is Deputy Scott Miller with the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office. I'm calling about your report regarding stolen firewood." "Yes, thank you for calling back. Did you get the information?" "I did. I need to ask you some questions. First, are you certain about what you saw?" "The visibility in this storm is very poor." I bristled at the implication. "Deputy, I watched her for 15 minutes from my window. I have video evidence. She parked on the street directly in front of my woodpile and made multiple trips loading wood into her vehicle. There's no question about what happened." "Okay. And you're sure this wood was on your property?" "Absolutely. I had the property lines verified by the county after she threatened me about it back in November. It's definitely within my boundaries." "What's the approximate value of the wood she took?" I'd anticipated this question. "I purchased 3 cords of seasoned hardwood for $900 in September. I estimate she took between 1.5 to 2 cords, so somewhere between $450 to $600 worth. There was a long pause. That puts this into felony territory if it's over $500. Are you sure about that estimate? I'm sure. And Deputy, I want to press charges. This isn't just about the money. The power is out. The temperature is negative 15 degrees and she stole my only reliable heat source during a state of emergency. My elderly neighbor might have needed to shelter with me. This could have been life-threatening. I understand your concern, Mr. Chen. Here's the situation. Every officer we have is dealing with emergency calls right now. We have people stranded in vehicles, medical emergencies, power lines down, and accidents all over the county. I can't send anyone to take a report until the storm passes. I understand that, but I want this documented now while the evidence is fresh. She probably has that wood stacked in her house right now. Tell you what, send me the video evidence you mentioned to my email. I'll file the report tonight and will send an officer to speak with both you and Ms. Whitmore as soon as the weather permits. Given the value you're describing and the circumstances, this would be investigated as felony theft. That's a serious charge. He gave me his email address, and I immediately sent him the video along with photos of my depleted woodpile and receipts for the wood purchase. He confirmed receipt a few minutes later. Got it. The video's pretty clear, even through the window. I can definitely identify her vehicle, and you can see someone matching her description. This is good evidence, Mr. Chen. Sit tight, stay warm, and someone will be out to see you as soon as possible. Thank you, Deputy Miller. I appreciate you taking this seriously. Between you and me, he said, his voice dropping slightly, I've dealt with Linda Whitmore before. She called us 6 months ago claiming her neighbor was threatening her, but it turned out she was harassing them about their lawn care. Some people think HOA president means they own the neighborhood. The law doesn't work that way. After the call ended, I felt a small sense of vindication. At least the authorities were taking it seriously. I fed the fire again and made myself dinner on my camping stove, nothing fancy, just canned soup heated up. I ate in front of the fireplace, watching the flames and thinking about how this would play out. Around 9, I received a 3-way call from Tom and Jennifer Walters. They were both on the line, talking over each other in their excitement. Marcus, you're not going to believe this, Tom said. We just talked to the Hendersons, who live next to Linda. They said Linda has been going around to different houses claiming she's collecting firewood on behalf of the HOA for communal emergency use. Jennifer jumped in. She told them the HOA emergency protocol allows her to commandeer resources during a crisis. She made it sound official, like she had the authority to do it. I felt my anger rising again. That's complete nonsense. There's no such protocol in our HOA bylaws. I read the entire document before I bought the house. We know, Tom said. We told the Hendersons that, but they had already let her take some of their wood. They said she seemed so official and confident that they just went along with it. How many other houses did she hit? We're not sure, Jennifer said, but the Hendersons said they saw her at the Johnsons' house earlier too. Marcus, she's using this storm to steal from multiple people and claiming it's legitimate HOA business. This changed everything. What I had witnessed wasn't just theft from one person, it was a systematic scheme to take advantage of the crisis. We need to document all of this. Can you two start contacting other neighbors and finding out who else she approached? Already on it, Tom said. I'm making a list. Jennifer is taking notes. If she really is doing this to multiple people, that makes it way worse, right? It makes it organized theft, pattern of behavior. Yeah, it makes it much worse. I thought for a moment. Listen, I've already filed a police report and sent them video evidence. When you compile your list, send it to me, and I'll forward it to the deputy I spoke with. Perfect. Marcus, thank you for standing up to her. Everyone in this neighborhood is tired of her power trips, but nobody wants to be the one to challenge her because she'll just make life miserable with violation notices and fines. Well, she went too far this time. You can't steal people's property and claim HOA authority. That's not how any of this works. Over the next 2 hours, Tom and Jennifer compiled information from 6 different households. Linda had approached 8 houses total, successfully taking firewood from 5 of them. The amounts varied. Some people had given her just a few pieces after her pitch about communal emergency use, while others, like me, had their supplies significantly depleted. In total, she'd probably collected enough wood to heat her large house comfortably for several weeks. The Hendersons also provided a crucial detail. Linda had told them she was collecting the wood for elderly residents and families with small children who didn't have adequate heat sources. It was a convincing lie that played on people's sympathy during a crisis. The reality, according to the Hendersons who had walked past her house earlier in the evening, was that all the wood was stacked on her own covered patio, and smoke was pouring from her chimney. I forwarded all of this information to Deputy Miller with a detailed email laying out the pattern of theft and the false pretenses Linda had used. He responded within 30 minutes. Mr. Chen, this information elevates the situation significantly. What you're describing is theft by deception from multiple victims. I'm adding this to the report. We will definitely be investigating this thoroughly. Make sure your neighbors are willing to provide statements when we come out. I confirmed that everyone was willing to cooperate and then settled in for the night. I kept the fire going, sleeping on my couch with every blanket I owned piled on top of me. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and pushing snow against the house in enormous drifts. The next morning, I woke to silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed by snow. Drifts reached halfway up my windows in places, and the street was completely impassable. The sun was out, blindingly bright against the white expanse. The temperature had risen slightly to -5 degrees. I checked on Mr. Patterson first thing. His voice was stronger on the phone, and he assured me his house had stayed warm enough overnight. "My son called from Bozeman," he said. "He's going to try to make it here today to check on me once they clear the highways. But Marcus, I heard from Sarah Martinez about what Linda did to other people. That's fraud, isn't it?" "I think so. The sheriff's office is taking it seriously." "Good. Keep me updated. And Marcus, thank you for checking on me. Not everyone in this neighborhood would think about an old man like me during something like this." The power came back on around noon, flickering at first and then stabilizing. My furnace roared to life, and within an hour the house was comfortable again. I kept the fireplace going anyway, not wanting to waste the wood I had already brought inside. Around 2 in the afternoon, I saw a sheriff's SUV making its way slowly down the plowed street. The county had gotten the main roads clear enough for emergency vehicles. I watched as the deputy pulled up in front of Linda's house, which was 4 doors down and across the street. A second patrol vehicle arrived a few minutes later. My phone rang. It was Deputy Miller. "Mr. Chen, I'm at the scene now. Can you come down to Ms. Whitmore's residence? I'd like to get your statement in person and have you identify your property if possible." I bundled up and walked through the snow to Linda's house. The path had been partially cleared, making it easier than I expected. When I arrived, I saw 3 deputies standing in Linda's driveway. Linda herself was on her front porch, wrapped in a bathrobe and looking furious. Deputy Miller was a tall man in his 40s with a weathered face and calm demeanor. He greeted me with a handshake. "Mr. Chen, thank you for coming down. I've been speaking with Ms. Whitmore about the allegations. She claims she was collecting firewood for communal emergency use under HOA authority." "That's a lie," I said flatly. "There's no such provision in our HOA bylaws. I've read them cover to cover, and even if there were, you can't just take people's property without permission." Linda's voice rang out from the porch. "I was trying to help people. This is what I get for caring about my community? He's just mad because I've had to fine him for multiple violations." Deputy Miller held up a hand. "Ms. Whitmore, I've asked you to let me conduct my investigation. Mr. Chen, can you see your property from here?" I walked around to Linda's side patio, and there it was, my firewood, still partially covered in snow, stacked against her house. I recognized specific pieces: a distinctive piece of oak with a knot that looked like an eye, several cherry wood logs I'd been saving for their pleasant smell, and my splitting marks on dozens of pieces. "That's my wood," I said. "I can identify specific pieces if you need me to." "Please do." Deputy Miller took out his notepad. I pointed out 6 different pieces with distinctive characteristics, unusual grain patterns, specific splitting marks from my maul, and the cherry wood that I had kept separate from the rest. Deputy Miller took photos of each piece and my descriptions. "Ms. Whitmore," Deputy Miller called out, "can you come down here, please?" Linda descended from her porch, her expression shifting between anger and what looked like growing concern. "What?" Mr. Chen has identified multiple pieces of this firewood as his property. He has distinctive marks and characteristics that he's documented. How do you explain that? He's lying. All firewood looks the same. He's just trying to get me in trouble because of our HOA disputes. I pulled out my phone and showed Deputy Miller the photos I had taken back in October when I first stacked the wood. The distinctive oak piece with the eye-shaped knot was clearly visible in multiple photos, along with several other pieces I had identified. The metadata on the photos showed they were taken months ago. Deputy Miller's expression hardened. Ms. Whitmore, I need you to be straight with me. Did you take firewood from Mr. Chen's property yesterday during the storm? I was collecting resources for the community. That's not what I asked. Did you take wood from his property, yes or no? Linda's face flushed. I took wood from multiple properties for redistribution to those in need. Did you have permission from the property owners? I have HOA authority. That's not permission. Did any of these homeowners explicitly give you permission to take their property? Linda's silence was telling. Deputy Miller sighed. Ms. Whitmore, based on the evidence Mr. Chen has provided, including video footage, photographic documentation, and witness statements from multiple neighbors, I'm placing you under arrest for felony theft. The color drained from Linda's face. What? You can't be serious. It's firewood. It's firewood valued at over $500 taken without permission during a declared state of emergency. That makes it felony theft. Additionally, you used false pretenses to obtain property from multiple victims, which adds theft by deception to the charges. He motioned to the other deputy. Read her rights. As the deputy began reciting the Miranda warning, Linda's shock turned to indignation. This is ridiculous. I'm the HOA president. I was helping people. Madam, you need to stop talking, Deputy Miller said firmly. You're being arrested. Anything you say can be used against you in court. They handcuffed Linda and placed her in the back of the patrol vehicle. She was still protesting, her voice muffled through the closed windows. Deputy Miller turned to me. Mr. Chen, you're free to retrieve your property. I've documented everything here with photos. You'll need to come to the station in the next few days to give a formal statement. Here's my card with the case number. The other victims will also need to provide statements. What happens now? She'll be booked and arraigned. Given the severity, multiple victims, false pretenses, theft during a state of emergency, the prosecutor will likely pursue this aggressively. The value across all victims probably exceeds $2,000, which is significant. She could be looking at up to 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine if convicted, though first-time offenders rarely get the maximum. I just want my wood back and for her to stop abusing her position. Deputy Miller smiled slightly. I think that's going to happen regardless. The HOA board will likely remove her once this becomes public. Felony charges tend to have that effect. Over the next hour, I retrieved my firewood with help from Tom Walters and another neighbor, Greg Johnson. We loaded it into my truck bed and hauled it back to my property. I restacked it carefully, feeling a sense of satisfaction with each piece returned to its proper place. News of Linda's arrest spread through the neighborhood faster than the blizzard had moved through. By evening, my phone was blowing up with messages from neighbors expressing shock, support, and, in many cases, their own stories of Linda's abuse of power. Several people mentioned they had been considering selling their homes just to get away from her tyrannical rule of the HOA. Tom and Jennifer came over that evening with a bottle of wine to celebrate. We sat in my living room, fireplace crackling, and talked about what this meant for the community. I can't believe she actually got arrested, Jennifer said, shaking her head. I mean, I wanted her to face consequences, but felony charges? That's serious. She stole from at least 5 households using lies and manipulation during a crisis, I said. That's serious criminal behavior, not just HOA overreach. Tom raised his glass. Here's to Marcus, the guy who finally stood up to Linda Whitmore and lived to tell the tale. We clinked glasses, and I felt something I hadn't felt since moving to Pinewood Hills, a sense of actual community. People weren't isolated in their houses, afraid of violation notices. They were talking, supporting each other, and standing together against abuse of power. The next morning, I drove to the sheriff's office to give my formal statement. The roads were mostly clear, though enormous piles of snow lined every street. Inside, I met with Deputy Miller and a detective named Sarah Reeves, who specialized in property crimes. Detective Reeves was thorough, asking detailed questions about everything that had happened. I walked her through the timeline, showed her all my documentation, and provided copies of the HOA bylaws that definitively showed no emergency resource collection provision existed. "Mr. Chen, you've done my job for me," she said with a smile. "This is one of the best documented cases I've seen. The video evidence alone is damning, but combined with your photos, receipts, and witness statements from multiple victims, this is extremely solid." What's the realistic outcome here? Linda Whitmore has no prior criminal record, which works in her favor. However, she committed calculated theft from multiple victims using her position of trust and authority. That works heavily against her. I expect the prosecutor to offer a plea deal, probably a reduced charge to misdemeanor theft, with restitution, probation, and community service. If she's smart, she'll take it. If she insists on going to trial and loses, she could face actual prison time. And the HOA situation? That's civil, not criminal. But I'd be shocked if she remains as president. The board would be insane to keep her after felony theft charges. Your community will likely need to elect new leadership. Over the next 3 weeks, the legal process unfolded. Linda was formally charged with 5 counts of felony theft, 1 for each household where the value exceeded $500, plus multiple counts of theft by deception. The total value of property taken was calculated at over $3,000. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Linda as president. She was also removed from the board entirely. Several board members reached out to me personally to apologize for not stepping in sooner to curb her behavior. The new interim president was Carol Anderson, a retired teacher who had lived in Pinewood Hills for 15 years. Her first act was to review all violation notices issued in the past year and dismiss those that were frivolous or outside the scope of the HOA's authority. My 3 violations were immediately dropped. Linda hired an attorney and initially insisted she would fight the charges. Her lawyer issued a statement claiming she had acted in good faith to help the community during an emergency and that any misunderstanding about permission was unintentional. The statement fell flat when the media got hold of the story. The local news picked it up as a human interest piece. HOA, president arrested for stealing firewood during blizzard. The story went viral on social media, with thousands of people commenting about their own HOA horror stories. Linda became a symbol of HOA overreach and abuse of power. The attention was overwhelmingly negative. 2 weeks after her arrest, Linda's attorney contacted the prosecutor's office to discuss a plea deal. I was informed by Detective Reeves that Linda would plead guilty to 5 counts of misdemeanor theft in exchange for the felony charges being dropped. The sentence would include 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, full restitution to all victims, and a prohibition on serving in any HOA leadership position during her probation period. "Is that acceptable to you?" Detective Reeves asked when she called with the update. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to see Linda face the full consequences of felony charges, but another part just wanted this resolved and to move forward. "Will I get my full restitution?" "Yes. She's required to pay you $600 for the wood she took, plus your costs for restacking and any other documented expenses related to the theft. And she can't be on the HOA board. Not for 3 years minimum. After that, it would be up to your community, but I doubt anyone would vote for her." "Then yes, that's acceptable. I just want this done." The plea hearing was scheduled for mid-February. I attended along with Tom, Jennifer, and 3 other neighbors who had been victims. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with wood paneling and fluorescent lights that hummed quietly. Linda looked diminished when she entered with her attorney. Gone was the imperious confidence I had witnessed during her HOA reign. She wore a conservative dark suit and kept her eyes down as the judge reviewed the plea agreement. Judge Patricia Winters was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who had clearly read the case file thoroughly. She addressed Linda directly. "Ms. Whitmore, do you understand that by accepting this plea agreement, you are admitting guilt to 5 counts of theft?" "Yes, Your Honor." Linda's voice was barely audible. "The court has reviewed the circumstances of these offenses. You held a position of trust in your community, and you exploited a natural disaster to steal from your neighbors under false pretenses. This behavior is particularly egregious Because you used your authority to manipulate people during a crisis when they were vulnerable. Do you understand the seriousness of what you've done? Yes, Your Honor. I'm accepting the plea agreement, but I want to be clear about something. Judge Winters leaned forward. If you violate any terms of your probation, if you fail to pay restitution, if you attempt to retaliate against any of the victims, you will be brought back before me, and I will impose the maximum sentence allowed by law. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Homeowners associations serve an important function in maintaining property values and community standards. What you did perverted that purpose and betrayed the trust your neighbors placed in you. I hope you use your community service hours to reflect on how you can rebuild that trust and become a positive member of your community rather than someone who exploits it. The judge signed the order, and it was done. Linda would pay full restitution within 90 days, complete her community service within 18 months, and report to a probation officer monthly. She was also ordered to have no direct contact with any of the victims outside of necessary HOA business conducted in official meetings with other board members present. As we left the courthouse, Jennifer turned to me. "How do you feel?" "Relieved," I admitted. "This whole thing has been exhausting. I just wanted to live in my house peacefully, you know?" "Well, you did more than that. You stood up to a bully and protected the whole community. That takes guts." Tom nodded in agreement. "Seriously, man, half the neighborhood wanted to do something about Linda, but were too scared. You actually followed through. The restitution check arrived 6 weeks later, $600, exactly as ordered. I deposited it and used part of the money to buy Mr. Patterson a cord of firewood as a thank you for his support and advice during the ordeal. He tried to refuse, but I insisted. "Marcus, you didn't need to do this," he said as we stacked the wood in his shed. "You were ready to help me even when you were in danger yourself," I said, "and you encouraged me to document everything and fight back. That advice probably made the difference in getting justice." Mr. Patterson smiled, his weathered face crinkling. "You know, I've lived through a lot of winters in Montana, but I've never seen anything quite like what happened with Linda. I've also never seen someone stand up for what's right as clearly as you did. This neighborhood is better for it." Spring arrived, bringing with it not just warmer weather, but a renewed sense of community in Pinewood Hills. The new HOA board, led by Carol Anderson, implemented several changes that made the neighborhood more livable and less oppressive. Violation notices were now issued only for legitimate concerns that affected property values or safety. The fine schedule was revised to be more reasonable. And most importantly, the board established clear procedures for handling emergencies that specifically prohibited the kind of overreach Linda had attempted. Linda herself became something of a pariah in the neighborhood. She kept to herself, rarely venturing out except for necessary errands. Her husband, who I learned was a quiet accountant named Richard, filed for divorce 3 months after her conviction. According to neighborhood gossip, he had been mortified by the entire situation and had apparently been trying to rein in Linda's HOA behavior for years without success. In May, I saw Linda performing her community service at a local food bank, sorting donations under the supervision of the volunteer coordinator. She glanced up as I walked past, and our eyes met for just a second. I saw something there that might have been shame or regret, but she quickly looked away. I didn't speak to her. There was nothing to say. The civil lawsuit came later, something I hadn't anticipated. 3 of the other victims decided to sue Linda for additional damages beyond the criminal restitution emotional distress, time lost from work, and punitive damages for her abuse of authority. They asked if I wanted to join the lawsuit, but I declined. I had my money back, Linda had been punished, and I was ready to move on. The civil case settled out of court for an undisclosed amount 6 months later. I heard through Tom that Linda had been forced to sell some investment properties to cover the settlement. She had apparently accumulated significant wealth over the years through her accounting business and real estate investments, so the financial hit, while substantial, didn't bankrupt her. But her reputation was thoroughly destroyed, and her business lost several clients who didn't want to be associated with someone convicted of theft. By the time the first anniversary of the blizzard rolled around, life in Pinewood Hills had settled into a new normal. The neighborhood had transformed from a place ruled by fear of arbitrary violations into an actual community where people looked out for each other. Block parties became regular events. Neighbors helped each other with yard work and snow removal. The Facebook group, which Linda had once used to announce violations and dues increases, became a place for people to share recipes, organize playdates, and coordinate community projects. I had also become more involved in the neighborhood, serving on the Architectural Review Committee and helping to organize a community emergency preparedness program. The blizzard had shown us all how vulnerable we could be when disaster struck, and we wanted to be ready if something similar happened again. We created a neighborhood resource map showing who had generators, who had medical training, who had four-wheel drive vehicles, and who might need extra help in an emergency. Mr. Patterson remained a close friend, and we had dinner together at least once a week. His son had convinced him to get a medical alert system after the blizzard scare, and he seemed healthier and more engaged with life than he had been when I first moved in. In October, exactly 1 year after I'd stacked my original woodpile, I ordered another 3 cords of firewood. This time, Tom and Greg helped me stack it, and we made an afternoon of it, grilling burgers and drinking beer once the work was done. As we sat on my patio admiring the neatly stacked wood, Tom raised his bottle in a toast. To the woodpile that ended a tyrant's reign. We all laughed and drank to that, but as I looked at my neighbors, people who had become genuine friends rather than just faces I waved to, I realized the story wasn't really about firewood or HOAs or even justice. It was about standing up for what was right even when it was difficult, about community forming in the aftermath of crisis, and about the fact that sometimes the smallest act of resistance can create ripples that change everything. Linda Whitmore completed her probation without incident in March, 3 years after her conviction. By then, she had moved out of Pinewood Hills entirely, relocating to a small condo in downtown Billings where there was no HOA to tempt her with power. I heard she had started volunteering regularly at the food bank where she had done her community service, apparently finding some measure of redemption in actually helping people rather than controlling them. I never spoke to Linda again after that brief eye contact at the food bank. I didn't feel the need for closure or apologies. What happened had happened, justice had been served, and both of us had moved on with our lives. The community she had once ruled with an iron fist had not just survived her departure, but had thrived in her absence. As for me, I learned valuable lessons about documentation, perseverance, and the importance of standing up to injustice even when it seems petty or small. What started as stolen firewood during a blizzard had revealed systematic abuse of power and had given an entire community the courage to demand better leadership. That winter night when I watched Linda steal my wood through a frosted window, I couldn't have imagined where the path would lead. But I'm glad I followed it. The woodpile on the side of my house stands as a reminder of everything that happened, each piece cut, split, stacked, stolen, recovered, and restacked, representing not just fuel for winter fires, but the story of how one person's overreach was stopped by another person's refusal to let injustice pass unchallenged. Every time I carry a log inside on a cold Montana night, I remember that moment of decision, when I chose to document what I was seeing rather than just let it go. That choice made all the difference, not just for me, but for every neighbor who had suffered under Linda's rule, and for the healthier, stronger community that emerged from the ashes of her reign. Montana winters remain brutal, with temperatures that can kill and blizzards that can bury everything in white silence. But my house stays warm, my firewood stays where I stack it, and the community around me is built on cooperation rather than fear. That's worth more than any amount of firewood could ever be. Sometimes justice is complicated and messy, involving courts and lawyers and plea deals that don't seem quite adequate to the crime. But sometimes justice is also simple. It's the right thing happening to the right people at the right time, and a community becoming stronger because someone decided that enough was enough. The story could have ended so many different ways. If I hadn't documented what I saw, if the deputies had dismissed my complaint as a civil matter, if Linda had been allowed to use her position to escape accountability, the abuse would have continued and probably escalated. Instead, one act of theft during a blizzard became the catalyst for real change. That's the power of accountability, of evidence, and of refusing to accept that people in positions of authority are above the law. I still live in Pinewood Hills, and I plan to stay here for many years to come. The mountain views are still beautiful, the streets are still well maintained, and the neighbors are genuinely friendly. The HOA serves its intended purpose without the corruption and overreach that characterized Linda's tenure. We've proven that an HOA can function properly when led by people who see it as a service to the community rather than as a personal fiefdom. Every fall, I stack my firewood, stack my fall. Every winter, I burn it to stay warm. And every time I do, I remember the blizzard, the theft, the stand I took, and the community that rallied together in the aftermath. It's a simple story in many ways. Someone stole my property. I called the police, and justice was served. But it's also a story about power, community, accountability, and the courage it takes to challenge someone who seems untouchable. Linda Whitmore stole firewood from my property during a blizzard, and she faced felony theft charges as a result. That's the headline, the simple version that people share on social media and talk about at parties. But the real story is deeper and more complex, a tale of how one community freed itself from tyranny and learned to function as actual neighbors rather than subjects of an HOA dictator. That transformation, more than any criminal conviction, is the true victory that came from that cold winter night. The wood burns hot and clean, keeping my house warm through the coldest nights. The community remains strong and supportive, a genuine neighborhood rather than just a collection of houses. Justice was served, lessons were learned, and life goes on better than it was before. Sometimes that's the best ending you can hope for, not perfect, but better, not without cost, but worth it. In the end, Linda's theft gave me more than it took. Yes, I lost firewood and spent time and energy on reports and statements and court appearances. But I gained friendships, respect from my community, and the knowledge that standing up for what's right actually matters. I became part of something larger than myself, part of a community that learned it didn't have to tolerate abuse just because someone held a title and wielded the threat of fines and violations. The blizzard passed, the wood was returned, and justice prevailed. It's a simple story with a simple moral. Theft is theft, no matter who commits it or what position they hold. The law applies equally to HOA, presidents, and everyone else. And when people stand together against injustice, they can create change that lasts far beyond any single incident. That's what I think about when I sit by my fireplace on cold winter nights, watching the flames dance across the logs I cut and split and stacked myself. Each piece of wood has a story, but together they tell a larger tale. A story of community, justice, and the simple truth that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, is always worth it in the end.